Warning. The following broadcast is not approved by your teacher, university, politician, or government. Side effects may include skepticism, better reasoning skills, liberty, peace, and an escape from the woke.
Welcome to the show. I am your host, LB Muniz, and this is the Been Awake podcast for better sense making. If you haven't already, if this is your first time coming across this show, whether you're live in X or Twitter Spaces, or you're catching the replay on YouTube, Rumble, on X, or on your favorite podcatcher, do me a favor, go to beenawake.com, subscribe with your email address, and follow me, most importantly on X, but hey, I'm also on Instagram at the LB Muniz. That's M-U-N-I-Z, in case you're listening to this. We got a fun show. Got a fun show for people today. I want to talk about the presidential election. I hope everybody had a lovely 4th of July. Hope everybody had a lovely 4th of July for Americans out there. And if you're not an American, but in America, I hope you enjoyed celebrating it. And hope it was filled with family. Hope you got a little bit of time off. I certainly enjoyed the time myself. I look very tan in the video version of this, but I'm not actually that tan. It's just the lighting. Anyway, I want to talk about the presidential debate. It happened about 2 weeks ago now. I got a little bit of a monologue prepared here. And, the title of this stream is Why You Shouldn't Feel Sorry for Biden. And I really want to try and fight a little bit against this fact of I get that he's old, but it's not enough. It's not enough to just feel sorry for him because he's the president and he deserves everything that's coming out of him. Moreover, I don't think he's the best kind of president or even a very good person to boot on top of that. So that's going to be what the episode's about. Let's start this monologue. And if you're listening live or if you're catching the replay, if you want to catch these, they go on Tuesday and or Wednesday nights. Just subscribe to me on X. You can see them when they come up. And when I remember, I send them out to the email list. I got to get better about doing that. But I'd love these to be back and forth. So that way, if I talk to a lot of people that I'm, friends with both online and in real life. I understand, right? Because this isn't easy to do a weekly show. And there's so many different things that you can listen to. So thanks for listening to this. But it's not easy to do a weekly show when you have a career or a job or other obligations, when this isn't the thing that makes most of your money for you. But I know there's a lot of people with things to say. And one of the reasons why I'm trying to use the Spaces platform is it enables you to kind of pop in and we can have a quick conversation. I don't love comments. Like me personally, I don't put things in group chats very often, right? I don't, not in group chats. Sorry. I don't put things in live comments on streams. Unless I'm participating in one. And I like to talk to people, if not face to face, then voice to voice. I think there's always something lost in the written word compared to a conversation, especially when we consider microblogging and just the vicious nature that social media kind of brings after us when we're disembodied voices. So I would love this to evolve into a conversation place for people to talk about either the monologue that I do or something else that might be on your mind. So if you're catching the replay of this, do feel free to reach out to me and I can say hey, let me know when you're going live, and I'll definitely do that. And I'll try to get better about sending it out to the email list as well. So let's get started, shall we? Let's see where this takes us. So the first presidential debate was just 2 short weeks ago, and millions of Americans had to face the reality that President Biden is, old. Honestly, it really seems silly for me to even say this, because that's exactly what anyone with any sense has thought since 2019, if not before. The man is too old and slow to do anything, let alone be president of the United States. The back and forth for the last 5 years has been something like this. Conservatives and those on the right will point out the obvious features of Biden's mental decline and his lack of cohesive thinking. This is followed by the liberal left-wing media lobbying attacks and defending the president. After all, he's the one who defeated Donald Trump. And more importantly, his handlers and spokespeople say he's okay. And we know that those in government never lie. So it must be true that he's actually super sharp and keeps up with everything. And also they'll bring up that Biden grew up with a stutter. So anything that looks like someone getting too old is really that. It's really that he had a stutter as a kid that he overcame, and now suddenly he has it again. Like that was something that was something that they put out like during the 2020 election that to me just seems like, listen, I understand that every day, every year, every presidential cycle, millions of new people are paying attention for the first time. And it's kind of crazy as I think about it now that like my first presidential cycle, I'm still fairly young compared to other people out there on the interwebs and in media commentary, but my first presidential cycle that I was an adult really paying attention to was in fact the 2012 election between Mitt Romney and Obama. But I also remember the 2008 election, 2004, and really 2004. I don't really remember much of the 2001 election. So which is to say, this has always been something of interest to me. And I even talked about on the couple of streams that I did that there's something so freeing now that I've let go of some old ideological assumptions about the best way for things to be that kind of has let me enjoy the spectacle and the sport of presidential politics just as much as, and I think that gives a better level, that gives a different level of analysis that benefits you, the listener and the reader. Then if it doesn't, if it seems like he's too old, it's because he has a stutter, right? That's the reason why. But at some point, there's an event, there's something that comes up that Biden must speak at. In earlier days in his presidency, he did do a couple of press conferences. I'm sure there's a counter out there that we can find, but I don't remember him doing one. I don't remember him doing one in the last year. And even his speeches have become less frequent. Of course, now that the campaign is picking up, they're putting them out there more. But we'll get into that. So at some point, Biden must speak at some kind of event. And lo and behold, he doesn't fall flat on his face. Right. And because the bar is set so low, because the conservatives are out there saying that he's a frail old man who can't speak anymore, and the liberals are saying he's sharp as a tack, he's the smartest he's ever been, and then he just kind of does okay. For the vast unthinking middle of the political electorate and more importantly, the casual observer, it's like, well, maybe it is somewhere in the middle. Maybe he's not as smart as he used to be, but that doesn't mean he's incompetent. That doesn't mean he's frail. That doesn't mean he maybe is, I don't know, suffering from some sort of degenerative disease. In this episode, I want to talk about what those reasons are. Why up until now, up until his first presidential debate during this cycle, he hasn't fallen flat on his face. Because in 2020, he did okay. Granted, yes, we'll hit this point multiple times. It is the case that he did poorly in the past, but he didn't do as bad as what people expected. Certainly not as bad as I expected as somebody who was observing him. So we'll talk about why. One concrete reason and a couple speculative reasons for why that is. I want to talk about why you shouldn't feel sorry for him, why you shouldn't feel sorry for Biden, what I think the Democrats are going to do next, and finally, we'll examine what this means about who is really in charge of government. But before I do that, I think it's worth you, the listener, understanding where I stand in relation to presidential elections and party politics. I have, for many years, been thinking and searching for better answers to the political questions of the day. I don't consider myself, at this point, a party man. And I don't really go out of my way to vote, I'll be honest. I understand, and part of the reason for this is this. I understand that every single vote is meaningless. It's only in the totality that they mean anything. And considering what can be accomplished through the exercise of public relations, that is to say propaganda, every informed voter is canceled out by an uninformed one. Now, my biases, just so we're clear, are not with the dominant left liberal ethos that animates most of our debates. I consider myself very much outside of that. In fact, I've said on the show and in my writing that I think people who truly believe in this current form of government are part of a cult. The cult of American democracy, I call it. I don't say this with malice, but with an understanding that we as humans are creatures of cult. Belief is far more important than facts or logic, especially when we zoom out from the individual and look at a group of humans as a whole. Like it or not, however, our current form of government is that of democracy. They tell us, and we believe, broadly speaking, that we, the people, elect representatives. And to me, then, as someone who kind of sits outside of this, I believe, like, you have a choice, right? I've written about this before. You can abstain. You can remove yourself from the political process. You can say you don't care. Today, I actually just watched Ari Shafir on Tucker Carlson's new show, and it's one of these interesting crossovers because I like Ari Shafir as a comedian. I enjoy Tucker Carlson as a commentator, so to watch them have an interesting interview was worth your while. I'd recommend going and watching it. And like, Ari Shafir is somebody who's like, dude, politics is stupid. Everybody's a liar. Why would you even pay attention to it? It doesn't matter. And there's a great case to that. But hey, you're listening to that. But hey, this is the kind of show I do. I do think there is something to be said for paying attention to these sorts of things, not necessarily to understand the will of the people. Like, a lot of people, especially in democracy, are obsessed with this idea that, like, we have to understand the will of the people so we can implement and execute their vision. No. What we need to do is understand how those in power try to shape that will to serve their ends. So why can Biden still give speeches? There's a few obvious reasons Biden was able to perform during the speeches and the debates during the 2020 election and subsequently as he's been president. In the first place, and I think this is, I like to build cases, right? So in the first place, he's been doing this his whole life. While many people fear public speaking, it's been something he's done, his entire adult life. And the best part about being a prominent politician is that you don't need to do the heavy legwork of writing a speech. You just have to be able to read it. And given that Biden almost never appears in front of the press for an impromptu conference or interviews with unfriendly media, not that there's very unfriendly media left out there, this makes his job easier. Most politicians, by the way, especially today, are not great orators. They aren't good. They aren't necessarily good at public speaking or are particularly clever. In fact, I think the most clever people end up in media kind of for that reason. But what most politicians are good at is memorizing talking points. Talking points are carefully crafted phrases designed to communicate ideas to their base and the broader American public. Practice them long enough, they become easy to remember. There have been reports throughout his presidency that Biden receives detailed instructions about how to walk into a room, which people he should call on, obviously the things he should say, and how to exit. I don't think this reason that I'm giving calls for high degrees of speculation. It's obvious when you take into account his career and the careful messaging that occurs at higher levels of government. But I'll admit, my next couple of reasons, they're a bit speculative. But I do think they're worth thinking about. First, it seems highly likely Biden is given some kind of amphetamine or some other kind of upper before important speeches and events, which helps him to quite literally perform. Depending on the length of the speech, his dosage will vary. The reality is, millions of Americans are prescribed amphetamines for ADHD, and the drug is ubiquitous across media for this simple reason, that they work. It helps one stay focused and clear, and if you're charged with keeping a presidential candidate coherent, some kind of drug would clearly serve your purpose. Moreover, there's been plenty of people who have said they've seen this happen and they understand it. If I had to guess, this is going to be one of those things that we discover in 30 or 40 years when somebody might write some memoir that talks about how they gave Joe Biden the drugs that helped him give various speeches. There have been many videos that have circulated in the aftermath of the first presidential debate that show the Biden of today is not the Biden of 2012 or even 2020. At some point, the utility of a performance enhancement will run out. And while Biden can give a speech off of a teleprompter, the dynamic elements of a debate and an interview seem to be beyond his grasp. Finally, it occurred to me during the debate, and this is my perhaps most speculative point, just speaking honestly, which is to say I don't have proof, most modern hearing aids have Bluetooth capabilities. And so it would be remarkably easy for someone to help the president along when he gets stuck, whether that be during a speech or during these debates. Now, of course, the claims that Biden was wearing an earpiece during the debate have been fact checked many times, but I, for one, don't trust the same outlets that have just woken up to the fact that Biden is an old man who finds it difficult to articulate cohesive thoughts for any extended period of time. Most of the people I talked to after the debate expressed a similar sentiment of feeling sorry for the president. And certainly, I'm human. I'm empathetic. I felt very much the same way. Like you feel sorry when you see somebody struggling like that. This is understandable. In fact, I believe we're programmed at a fundamental level to recognize the frailty in our elderly. Good people take that and realize that the elderly are somebody that should be cared for, and bad people take that to realize the elderly are people that can be taken advantage of. This isn't to say that our elders aren't important for civilization, but it is to say we know without thinking they are not the same as those in the prime of their life. Biden has spent his entire adult life leeching off the American taxpayers and playing the part of a dutiful party man and saying whatever he has to stay in power. Whether that meant calling blacks in urban areas super predators when the Democrats were behind the crime bills of the 90s, or today when he advocates for the genital mutilation of children, his words ring hollow, as he has been a man without principles save his own advancement and the enrichment of his family. To be fair, it worked for him. His son was given lucrative contracts with overseas corporations that enriched both him and the Biden family at large, and now he sits in the highest elected office. I think part of the narrative for Biden supports, part of the narrative for Biden supporters seek to capitalize on this natural empathy good people have for the elderly to obfuscate the obvious truth. The president should be able to speak in something resembling full sentences on national television. Before the debate, my assumption was the media was going to do everything they could to set up Biden for success. All the headlines, no matter what happened, were going to be pro-Biden and anti-Trump. And in fact, I was wrong. After all, and I was wrong, but you know, it's a pretty good thought. And even though I was wrong, they didn't say Trump won. All the headlines were that Biden lost. Almost everyone in prominent media corporations are liberals or something to the left of that. And their bias is to protect the president that defeated Trump in 2020, allegedly. Trump, after all, is all of the negative things people say about him, and therefore he cannot be allowed to win a free and fair election, lest democracy be ruined. Trump should not be allowed to win a free and fair election, otherwise democracy will die. If that doesn't make sense to you, it's because when most people say democracy, they mean the post-World War II left liberal order. The aftermath has been different than what I had initially speculated as to. After admitting the Biden lost, it seems most prominent anchors, pundits, and journalists either realized they were fooled by the Biden administration or more likely realized they needed to cover their butts because they had not covered or talked about the president's obvious decline. When Vivek Ramaswamy said during the Republican primary debates that Biden should step aside and the Democrats should tell him to step aside so that the Republicans in the primaries should be able to go after the actual nominee, the person that would actually be put into power, he was called rude, mean, evil, nasty, all the bad things in the world. And all the journalists followed their herd and said he was a liar, a fool, and the kind of person dangerous to democracy. Now, headlines in prominent outlets like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal have either called for Biden to step down or speculated as to how he could be removed from office. We've even also seen now prominent Democrats of various forms saying that maybe he should step aside, and others have come to his defense, of course. But listen, like, I recently turned on the Apple News notifications on my phone, something I had off for a while. There's been a lot of people have been talking about it. It's not just my little corner of the internet on X. The Biden team and Biden himself, by contrast, have shown no signs of wavering. They've said that they're in this. In fact, Biden decided he wanted to give this interview with George Stephanopoulos right after the debate, and he went out and gave a speech right after the debate. And he said, hey, listen, I know this was a bad time. This wasn't my best performance. One bad performance in a career of great performances means that you should continue to vote for me. There have also been reports that access to the president has been limited by those closest to him, namely his wife, Jill Biden, and his son, Hunter Biden. If you didn't know, this isn't the first time a president hasn't made the day-to-day decisions of his administration. Woodrow Wilson, who's perhaps the most infamous U.S. president, the man who wanted to make the world safe for democracy and has a lot of the reasons, is a lot of the reasons behind the problems of today, but that's for another show, contracted the Spanish flu and suffered a massive stroke, which basically, to my understanding, rendered him bedridden. Couldn't get up, couldn't make coherent thoughts, could barely speak. Rather than have him step down, his wife restricted access to the president and making decisions in his stead, and if memory serves, even signed his name. When the truth about this became known, and also when Dwight Eisenhower got sick a few times, Congress passed the 25th Constitutional Amendment, which, amongst other things, provided for the chain of succession, saying that definitely the vice president's the one who takes over if the president is killed or incapacitated. And it also provides a specific stipulation which reads, whenever the vice president and a majority of either the principal officers of the executive departments or of such other body as Congress may by law provide, transmit to the president pro temp of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives their written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, the vice president shall immediately assume the powers and duties of the office as acting president. The president is just as much a figurehead as he is an executive. In fact, given the size and scope of the executive branch, there seems to be very little a president can actually do to change anything. Whether it be intelligence agencies or the general nature of bureaucracy, most decisions made by the government are not handed down from Congress or the president. It comes from the people who stay there across administrations. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound very democratic to me. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. If you liked it, do me a favor and subscribe, and go follow me on social media at the LB Muniz.
If you like what you heard today, go to beingawake.com to subscribe for future updates. My name is LB Muniz, and I am not one with the woke.